The Battle of White Horse was another in a series of bloody battles for dominant hilltop positions during the Korean War. Baengma-goji was a 395-meter hill in the Iron Triangle, formed by Pyongyang at its peak and Gilwari-up and Shaowan at its base. Was a strategic transportation route in the central region of the Korean peninsula. White Horse was the crest of a forested hill mass that extended in a northwest-southeast direction for about 2 miles. Part of the area controlled by the U.S. Ninth Corps, and considered an important outpost hill with a good command over the Yukok-Chon Valley, dominating the western approaches to Shaowan. Loss of the hill would force the Ninth Corps to withdraw to the high ground south of the Yukok-Chon in the Shaowan area, would deny the Ninth Corps use of the Shaowan road net, and would open up the entire Shaowan area to enemy attack and penetration. During 10 days of battle, the hill would change hands 24 times after repeated attacks and counterattacks for its possession. It was one of the most intense positioned grasping battle for a small hill during the course of the Korean War. Afterwards, Baengma-goji looked like a threadbare white horse, thence its name of Baengma, meaning a white horse. Background: on October 3, 1952, a defecting lieutenant from the 340th Regiment under interrogation revealed that an attack on White Horse was imminent. Being corroborated by other intelligence, the 9th Corps reinforced the ROK 9th Division with 22 tanks from the 53rd Tank Squadron and the U.S. 73rd Tank Battalion's C Company, artillery, rocket launchers, and anti-aircraft weapons to be used in a ground role. Major General Kim Jong-ho stationed the 30th Regiment under Regimental Commander Im Ik-sun in charge of the left forefront and the 29th Regiment under Commander Kim Bong-chil in charge of the right forefront on the threatened hill, and held the 28th Regiment under Commander Lee Jewel in reserve. On the flanks of White Horse he positioned the tanks and anti-aircraft guns to cover the valley approaches. Searchlights and flares were distributed to provide illumination at night, and a flare plane was made available to supply additional light on call during the hours of darkness. From the 5th Air Force came extra airstrikes against enemy artillery positions adjacent to White Horse. Battle. On October 6, an intensive air raid was carried out on several places around Baengma-goji where the Chinese were anticipated to assemble. The Chinese responded by opening the floodgates of the Pongniho Reservoir, which was located about 7 miles north of the hill, evidently in the hope that the Yukok-Chon, which ran between the ROK 9th and the U.S. 2nd Division, would rise sufficiently to block reinforcements during the critical period. Simultaneously, they threw a battalion-sized force at Hill 281, 2 miles southeast of White Horse across the valley, to pin down the French battalion astride the hill and to keep the 2nd Division occupied. Before the night was over, 6 additional companies joined in the action. The French held firm and inflicted heavy casualties upon the attackers. As a diversion to the main attack, it proved effective but expensive. At 1915, the 340th Regiment sent 4 companies up to the northwest end of the White Horse Hill complex to engage the 10th Company and its supporting forces, in an attempt to secure a breakthrough. At 200 the following morning, 4 B-29 strategic bombers dropped 1,000-pound bombs on Hajin Myeongdong, and an assortment of 81 artillery guns dealt intensive heavy fire. Nevertheless, the Chinese breakthrough widened further, though suffering an estimated 500 casualties the first night. Disregarding the heavy losses, the Chinese committed the remnants of the original 2 battalions and reinforced him with 2 fresh battalions from the same division the following day. Cutting off a ROK Company outpost, the Chinese pressed on and forced the elements of the ROK 10th Company to withdraw from the crest. Less than 2 hours after the loss of the peak, Two battalions of the ROK 28th Regiment mounted a night attack that swept the Chinese out of the old ROK positions by 23:05. Again, the Chinese losses were heavy, and a Chinese prisoner later related that many of the companies committed to the attack were reduced from 190 to 200 to less than 20 men after the second day of fighting. With such serious losses, the Chinese switched its attack forces from the 340th Regiment to the 334th Regiment, reserving the 342nd Regiment for the assault on October 9. Elements of the 342nd fought their way to the crest during the afternoon of October 9, only to lose it to a ROK 28th Regiment counterattack that night. On October 10, the still-fresh 29th Regiment made a counterattack and seized White Horse, and the 28th Regiment was immediately assigned to defend the right flank of the hill. The same day at 0430, the Chinese 342nd Regiment recaptured the hill in an attack on the ROK 29th Regiment that had been defending the main peak. In 2 hours, though, the hill was seized back in an instant counterattack, only to be lost again at 0815. In the tiresome war of attrition, the UN forces relied on their overwhelming advantage in artillery support and close-range air support. The UN forces apparently were fortunate, for a Chinese prisoner later related that 5th Air Force planes had caught elements of the 335th Regiment, 112th Division, in an assembly area north of Hill 395, inflicting heavy casualties upon the regiment, and had delayed its commitment to the attack. Regardless of casualties, the Chinese continued to send masses of infantry to take the objective. On White Horse, the Chinese kept funneling their combat troops into the northern attack approaches where 8th Army artillery, tanks, and air power would wreak havoc. The Chinese determination to win White Horse made sitting ducks out of their infantry, as the 9th Corps defenders saturated the all-out assaults with massed firepower of every caliber. By October 12 there was a break in the bitter struggle. The 1st Battalion of the 30th Regiment struck out from the attack line. The 29th Regiment, which had mounted a counterattack 4 hours before the attack by the battalion, was stalled just 40 meters from the enemy position. When no progress was made in the 2-hour attack, the 2nd Battalion was sent in on the right flank for a pincer movement. The 3rd Company, which was in the vanguard of the 1st Battalion, was not making sufficient advances because of Chinese resistance. So the commander of the 1st Company, close behind the 3rd Company, was ordered to launch an overriding attack and succeeded in approaching the attack line. White Horse was recaptured at 13:20, after 5 hours of intense battle. On October 13, under close-range air cover by 141 warplanes, the 28th Regiment was committed to Nakta-Noingassian, but the strong Chinese resistance forced it to withdraw to White Horse 6 hours after the attack on the ridge had begun. On October 14, the 29th Regiment executed another attack, and at 10:40, the 22nd Battalion of the regiment routed the Chinese troops from Nakta-Noingassian, thus seizing full control of White Horse. Aftermath. The 38th Army committed 4 regiments, the 334th, 339th, 340th, and 342nd Regiment. Chinese side claimed it suffered a total of 6,700 casualties. The 9th Division of South Korea committed 3 regiments, the 28th, 29th, and 30th Regiment, and suffered a total of 3,422 casualties, plus over 400 more casualties in the 1st Battalion of the 30th Regiment. The American 5th Air Force made a total of 745 sorties and poured more than 2,700 bombs of various kinds, together with over 358 napalm bombs, onto the hill. Chinese forces rained no less than 55,000 shells during the 9-day battle period, and the South Korean forces fired over 185,000 shells. Both the 38th Army and the 9th Infantry Division, after suffering heavy casualties, had to withdraw to the rear. Following the battle, the ROK 9th Division gained the nickname White Horse Division.